Are there constructive things that you can do to help restore a culture of life? Find out next on this edition of Life Matters. Brian Johnston has been a teacher and a coach, a legislative advocate, what's sometimes called a lobbyist, a husband and a father. He has committed himself to affirming the value and significance of each human life, even the seemingly insignificant. And now here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Well, welcome listeners across California and really across the nation and around the world via podcast. This is a special program that I'd like to introduce first, and it's because it deals with a very specific and unique aspect of what we usually talk about on this program, Life Matters, your program on life, culture, the battle of ideas. You know, if you're a longtime listener, that we're very concerned about a dramatic change in medical ethics, so that now medicine no longer feels very obligated to you when your body starts to fail. That's really why medicine has existed, is to help the body in which you live. But with the change in medical ethics, doctors no longer feel a need to heal or attempt to heal. And if they can't heal, they've always sworn to care, but never kill. Now doctors are licensed to kill. And so now medicine has changed so that they don't have that obligation of caring. They actually may feel an obligation to simply be rid of you, that they can end pain by simply ending your life. And this is very, very dire. What it does is it brings back something else we've talked about many times in this program, and that is your responsibility to be aware of the ideas that are being pushed on you and your family, and to be involved in the case of nursing home care, long-term care. Don't just send someone to an institution. We've given you many, many examples of this. Unless you, as a family member, unless your family is involved, it's very difficult at times. Even the best of institutions are full of bureaucracy, and often patients are forgotten and shunted. You must be involved in this battle. It's critically important. And now let me bring it to this bottom line. You must be in the battle for your own life as well. You want to maintain your health because that's where your life is. If your body loses its health, that's where you live, in your body. This program is going to talk about a very important issue, the issue of inflammation. Science now indicates that many of the most chronic diseases, the most deadly diseases, actually have their origin in inflammation. And it turns out, as you're going to hear from Dr. Brind, that glycine, the lack of sufficient glycine, can actually lead to inflammation. So Dr. Joel Brind is going to join us here shortly in this important program.
You're listening to Life Matters.
27 other states offer Celebrate Life license plates, but in California, your legislature wants to sponsor Celebrate Abortion license plates. Find out what you can do about it at CaliforniaProlife.org. That's California Pro-Life, all spelled out, no hyphens. CaliforniaProlife.org.
Be sure to subscribe to the Life Matters podcast with Brian Johnston. Go to lifematters.life to subscribe. And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Well, you're listening to Life Matters, your program on life, culture, and the battle of ideas. We have a good friend on with us today, Dr. Joel Brind. And Dr. Brind has done research on breast cancer and the abortion connection, and we've had him on before regarding that. But Dr. Brind has also studied in depth the whole issue of inflammation. And all of you, if you get sore, you have pains, you're familiar with inflammation, but your whole body is often dealing with inflammation, and it's a huge problem. I'm going to let Dr. Brind explain something that can be done to address this issue and why it's important for your life. You know, at Life Matters, yes, we're talking about life and the value of every life, but that includes yours. So I'm very pleased to be joined again by Dr. Joel Brind.
Well, hi, thanks for having me on again. Interesting the way you frame the issue of inflammation. The way I would put it is that most of us actually never really reach a natural death, where rather we are slowly being poisoned to death by our own immune system that causes inflammation. And it's now appreciated that most of the things that make us sick and die these days, whether it be cancer, heart disease, stroke, arthritis, diabetes, and many other conditions, are due to chronic inflammation, but it's not appreciated as to why that is. And what I've discovered is that basically inflammation is not exactly what we thought it was. That is to say, it has generally been thought by medical science and biological science that inflammation is a natural response to injury. You sprain your ankle, it gets swollen and sore and stiff, and inflammation.
Right.
And that's supposed to be natural. But the funny thing is, it doesn't happen to me because I have figured out the secret of it, and it's really one nutritional ingredient. It's not what we eat really that's giving us inflammation, it's what we don't eat. And the modern diet is deficient in one particular amino acid called glycine. It's the simplest amino acid there is, and it's one that is considered non-essential, which is one of the reasons why it's been overlooked, because our bodies can make it from scratch. And it is normally present in our blood in high concentrations, but just not high enough, because it's glycine that actually has a key role in regulating the cells that cause the inflammation. Now, what is inflammation? Well, inflammation is a process by which a certain kind of white blood cells, and it's not just in the blood, there are cells that are this kind of amoeba-like cells that come around whenever there's any kind of infection or any kind of injury, and it's their job to come in and clean up the mess. Now, if it's injury, they go around and they gobble up the dead cells and the cell debris, they clean up the mess. But it's only when there is infection that they cause inflammation, that they get activated and start secreting poisons. Why?
Wow.
Because they'd rather kill those bugs that are coming in before those bugs kill you. So, for example, if you skin your knee, now there's a break in the skin, and infection can come in, and you put a little hydrogen peroxide on it. It says right on the bottle, do not take internally. The funny thing is, what's happening internally is your macrophages, those cells that do the inflammation, are in there secreting hydrogen peroxide and other poisons, even though it will damage normal tissue, because they've got to kill that infection. Now imagine, due to a nutritional imbalance, that these cells become activated just because there's injury. So you sprain your ankle, that's a blunt injury. So you get a sunburn. You know, your skin gets all red, so you get out of the sun. Well, why does it get worse after you've already gotten out of the sun? It's not sun damage, it's secondary inflammation. And it doesn't happen to me, because I have developed a supplement of glycine, because glycine is a bulk nutrient. It's not a drug of any kind, and it's not a micronutrient like a vitamin that you need micrograms or milligrams of. You need grams of this stuff every day.
Wow.
So I developed a product that I call Sweetamine, and Sweetamine is in packets. Each stick pack contains, among other ingredients to make it taste better, it contains 8 grams, 8,000 milligrams of glycine, and all you got to do is add it to your favorite hot drink, or cold drink for that matter, coffee or tea, and you add it once a day, and it gives you 8 grams of glycine, and it gives you about the sweetness of 2 teaspoons of sugar, but there's no sugar in it. There's no carbs in it.
Wow.
There's no artificial sweeteners in it. And in fact, it not only is safe for diabetics, but it helps to reverse type 2 diabetes. Why? Because type 2 diabetes is one of those conditions that's caused by inflammation. So inflammation now is chronic in us because of this insufficient amount of glycine in our diets. Why is glycine insufficient in the modern diet? Well, the best source of glycine in food is collagen. Collagen is gelatin. It's basically from the bones and connective tissues of the meat, fish, and poultry we eat. That's why grandma's chicken soup is good for you.
Right.
But most of the time, we just throw that stuff away.
Yes.
Bone broth is now coming into vogue as a very popular, I wouldn't say snack or supplement, but just something for people to eat. And a lot of people think it's great and it's wonderful, and some people think it's going to be a passing fad. It won't be.
No, that's
because it's a good source of glycine. The easiest source of glycine is just Sweetamine. All you got to do is change your sweetener once a day, and you get 8 grams, a lot of glycine. And what this does is it stops inappropriate inflammation. And it's not just from injuries that you notice, like, you know, if you sprain your ankle or if you get a sunburn, but in the normal process of blood circulation, in the arteries, where you have high pressure branch points in your carotid arteries, your coronary arteries, your renal arteries, where people get atherosclerosis and they get heart attacks and strokes and malignant hypertension. Why does that happen? That's because naturally in a high pressure fluid system, wherever you have a branch point, you have turbulence. Where you have turbulence, you get micro injuries. If they just heal, no problem. If they develop into inflammation,
problem.
Then you get chronic inflammation, you end up with atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis there also in your brain. Dementia can be caused by these things, and also diabetes. So it's now appreciated that it is inflammation that's at the root of these diseases. But why has a lot to do with glycine, and the research is coming out slowly but surely as it takes. The more you see some of these papers come out looking for correlates of people who have heart disease, people who have cancer, people who have arthritis, and they compare everything they can find in the blood of people who have the disease and people who don't. Glycine comes out to be the common denominator.
That's amazing. I concur so much. Let me ask this. What is your source in sweetamine? What is the source?
It's actually made in a factory. Glycine is one of those compounds that's so simple that I don't even consider it organic. Sure, it has carbon and it's made by living things, but it's also made in the non-living world. Mm-hmm. You can find glycine in comets' tails and asteroids. Mm-hmm. It's such a simple compound that it's made in nature. Your own liver can make it from carbon dioxide, ammonia, and formaldehyde. So this can be made in a factory so that it's basically not an animal source at all. We don't get it from collagen or gelatin.
Yes.
It's not from an animal source. It's just very simple to make in a factory, and it's the kind of supplement that has a 100% safety record. Now, we can't make any claims that it's going to prevent or cure cancer or heart disease, although it has been shown to help with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. There is a good clinical trial of that. But this kind of research takes years. So you have something that's really harmless, which may do all kinds of wonderful beneficial things. I've been taking it for almost 10 years myself.
That's excellent.
And you'll have to vouch for how young I look. I'm 65 years old.
He's amazingly young. It's stunning. And you'll see the picture on the website. Just incredibly handsome, very young and vibrant for such an old fellow.
Yeah, right.
But I do confirm this, and this is something I've told my wife. She likes to buy chickens at the store, and then she buys the whole chicken, and then we make chicken sandwiches or add the chicken, later that day or the next day we use it in tacos or whatever she wants to use it with. But I've asked her, please keep the carcass.
Throw it in the soup pot and boil it all day long.
As you said, that's been the tradition. We don't do that anymore. We've been spoiled. But that's some of the best part of the chicken.
And that's why the glycine deficiency has become much more prevalent. Much more debilitating, really, for so many people.
That's right.
I had a student recently who was from Peru, and she was in her early 30s. And I talked about glycine a little bit in class because it's some of my most important research. And she said, I always eat those, the cartilage on the end of the chicken bone myself, but I don't know if I get enough of it. She said, but when I go back to the old country in Peru, my grandparents are still working the farm, and they're in their 90s. I come back home, and my parents, who are only, late 50s, early 60s, they can hardly move with all the arthritis and the high blood pressure and all the other problems.
We're talking right now to Dr. Joel Brind, and he is an expert in many fields, but in particular, his field is...
Actually, my specialty in basic medical science is biochemistry, physiology, and immunology. And what I've learned about glycine is really the intersection of these fields.
Yes.
It's a very important biochemical intermediate whose role in regulating the cellular membrane activity of these macrophages, the cells that cause inflammation, is very key. And it requires it to be in our blood, in our body fluids, in very high concentrations. And although our bodies can make it, they can't make enough. That's why I formulated Sweetamine, which you can get at sweetamine.com, SWEETAMEINE.com. And I guarantee it, so if it doesn't do anything for you, you can have your money back. It's just a way to get it out there because it's just food. I don't make any claims about it except that it's absolutely not going to hurt you.
We're talking to Dr. Joel Brind. He's talking about inflammation. Everybody knows now that inflammation is a source of many of our illnesses. When we come back from this break, we're going to talk a little bit more about Sweetamine and why he came up with Sweetamine and why you can benefit from it if you're not eating properly. And to be honest, if you're on the modern American diet, you have very highly processed foods. You have a chicken sandwich, you're not getting the best part of the chicken.
The worst processing that we do to our meats, fish, and poultry is cutting the muscle off the bone and throwing the bones away.
Yes, that great point. You're listening to Life Matters, your program on life, culture, and the battle of ideas.
Life Matters continues after this.
You're pretty amazing. The reason I can say that is America's founders said that about you. That's right. They said that every human being is created by a creator and given rights by that creator. Those rights are not given by the government. It's the government's job to protect those rights. And the very first and most important is the right to be alive, the right to life.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters, your program on life, culture, and the battle of ideas. And it's a very real battle. And lives are truly at stake. That's just not a metaphor. It's not hyperbole. As you know, we talk about the value of each and every life on Life Matters. And we've been talking to a very special guest, Dr. Joel Brind. And Dr. Brind has done many studies. He's made great contribution to the Right to Life movement. And he's been concerned that some people right now don't understand that their lives are at risk, and there's things that they can do with their own lives right now that can prevent problems in their life. And I agree with him, because we need you around. The Right to Life isn't about just little babies or elderly people. It's also about you. Your life is valuable. And Dr. Brind has done a study on inflammation, and many of you already know the implications of inflammation on disease. It's one of the sources of many diseases, but he's also come across why inflammation is there and what you can do about it. Dr. Brind, tell us again what someone can do to address inflammation in their body.
Well, inflammation has become a chronic and widespread problem, and it underpins almost all the major diseases that make us sick and die these days. And it turns out that the reason is that our diets are deficient in the simplest amino acid there is, that's called glycine. So while all the research is ongoing, we can eat glycine because it's a bulk nutrient and keep ourselves alive so that we actually may make it to natural death instead of allowing our immune systems to poison us to death with chronic inflammation. And so what I did is I formulated a product called Sweetamine. I formulated glycine and a couple of other ingredients to make it taste a little better by putting it in packets, in stick packs, so that it's used as a sweetener. It's more than a sweetener, way more than a sweetener. It's actually a nutrition completener, if you will. It gives you that 8 grams of glycine that most of us are missing in our diet, and all you got to do without changing anything else or going on a bone broth craze or any of that stuff is you just have to change your sweetener once a day. Just have this as a sweetener in your tea or coffee, and it will keep your body from having any kind of inflammation due to things like injury and sunburn and any kind of internal problems, normal functioning that usually produces injury because most people are glycine deficient. So, for example, there has been a good study showing that it actually helps to cure type 2 diabetes, because the diabetes type 2 is another one of those inflammatory conditions. And you give it glycine and it can go away. There have been studies that are called observational studies, not clinical trials, where they looked at heart disease, heart attack, stroke, other diabetic conditions, pre-diabetic conditions, and when they look at all of the amino acids and other metabolites in the blood, they find out that people who have these conditions more likely to have heart disease and to have heart attacks and diabetes and so forth tend to be lower in their levels of glycine. Glycine is an amino acid that is normally in very high concentrations in everybody's blood, but it's usually not high enough. And it is that role of glycine, high concentrations of glycine, which regulate the cell membranes and tame the macrophages, the cells that actually cause inflammation, so that when there is any kind of injury or cell death, they merely come around and clean up the mess without getting activated to secrete poisons to kill microbes that aren't there. And that's what we have to do, is keep our immune system, our innate immunity that is affected by macrophages, to keep these cells from reacting as if we have an infection when there is merely some kind of injury or micro-injury or natural cell death occurring. And if you take 1 packet of Sweetamine every day, just 8 grams, which you can get from sweetamine.com, and it's completely harmless. And if you don't like what it does, or you don't think it's doing anything for you, I'm happy to give you your money back. The main thing is that because it's just food, before we have proof that it can cure things or prevent things, we don't need any of that. It's just a nutrient which will not do you any harm. And that's why I made it available, and I hope that you'll take advantage of that, as I have for about the last decade myself. And it stops what largely is attributed to aging. Stiffness and soreness. I mean, I shovel snow in the winter. I'm not from California, or in the mountains. I'm from the Northeast. And I used to shovel snow, and by the time I was in my late 20s, I used to get lots of aches and pains from shoveling snow. I don't have any problems shoveling snow now. And I'm in my late 60s, and I just, it's fine.
Yeah, and let me tell you, you can't see him, but really he doesn't look like he's in late 60s. His skin is smooth. He's got a couple of wrinkles that you and I would normally have, but not that many. I've got more, and I'm younger. So this is Dr. Joel Brind, and he's talking about a particular product that he came up with, but it's based on the science that he has pursued, and no one else was coming up with this answer. So he took it upon himself to make sure that people have this available. And this is called Sweetamine, Sweetamine. And you can find out more at sweetamine.com. Go to sweetamine.com. You can see references to these studies, and you can get, again, guaranteed, if you don't like it, send it back, and you'll get your money back. But myself, I've actually wanted to do this. As I said, I've been nearly forcing my wife to boil chicken. She doesn't want to do that. I've been trying to get what I know is a deficiency in my own diet, in the American diet, in the Western diet. And you probably have experienced that yourselves when you realize there's something missing in our diet.
Right. Now, remember, there are many things on the market now that are targeted for keeping down inflammation. So everything from curcumin to other botanical extracts and so on, which are what we might call nutraceuticals. And they do help. But this, glycine, is actually the substance that your own body uses to regulate the function of your innate immune system. And it's just that we don't have enough. So you're not adding anything that your body doesn't already have, that your body doesn't already make, and that your body doesn't already have lots of in circulation. But it's not usually high enough. And once it is high enough, you will not get things like, I used to get terrible sunburns, and I was at a ball game in June a few years ago, and I was taking 8 grams of glycine every day to see what would happen. And I really did it to myself. I went to this ball game, a Yankee game in the brand new Yankee Stadium, and it was very exciting for me because I'm a lifelong Yankee fan. And it was June, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and it was a new stadium with no poles or anything like that. So we're out there in the sun, and I had my shorts and my Yankee t-shirt and no hat and everything like that. And I hadn't brought any sunscreen because I wasn't going to the beach. I never thought about sun exposure. Well, around the 5th inning, I started to feel kind of warm.
Yes.
And my thighs. And I looked down, and I was as red as a boiled lobster, and my arms and my neck and my face. And I knew that I hadn't done this to myself since I was in my 20s, that I knew I was going to have excruciating pain for the next couple of days, getting dressed, undressed, bathed. Well, the first thing I did, of course, is get out of the sun. And you know what? It just started to go away. And I never had any of those symptoms. And that was one of the results from self-experimentation, which showed me that this is just secondary inflammation. This is not sun damage, it's inflammation. It's not aging, it's inflammation. And as things happened, I realized and put 2 and 2 together, and over a course of a few years, between about 2007 and 2010, I decided to put together a product and make it available for the general public. While the research, I am doing research with the National Institute on Aging, for example, on increasing lifespan in mice. We've already shown that it increases lifespan in rats to have supplemental glycine. So this is certainly something that's good for you, but because it's just a food and it's not a drug of any kind, and I don't make any drug claims of any kind, you might as well just take it. That's why I made it available, so that we can all do that while we're waiting for the research to unfold.
This is so important. Many of you who know me know that I was a commissioner on aging in California, and these are the kind of issues that have always fascinated me. I think they're vital because what happens in our society now, and Dr. Brind and I have been talking about this, medicine is changing so that when you are most vulnerable, medicine no longer follows the Hippocratic Oath. And sadly, when situations arise and when your body does have various illnesses that in many cases are the result of inflammation. Medicine isn't necessarily there to help you. And sadly, as we know, with the legalizing of assisted suicide, with intentional medical neglect and denying elderly patients food and water, it's become very sinister. What's critical is that on our part, as we age, we do our best to age well, to use our bodies well. They're the temple of the Holy Spirit. We have a responsibility, and I believe that the issue of glycine is actually very important.
Yes, you see a lot of the commercials, for example, for medications for different kinds of inflammation, plaque psoriasis and arthritis. You have what are called, technically in the business, they're called biologics. Things like Humira and other very expensive and very, very potent drugs. You listen to the last few words of all those commercials and they'll tell you how don't go anywhere where you might get a fungus or you might get a virus and it might cause all kinds of serious infections. Why? Because what glycine does is it naturally tames the cells that cause inflammation. What these biological drugs do is they kill the cells that cause inflammation so that they can't do what they're supposed to do when you do get exposed to a microbe that's infectious. That's why, as they tell you right out there, you are so vulnerable to infections when you take these strong biologic drugs, strong, expensive drugs, and eventually they wear you down and they do you more harm than good, and then you end up in a situation where your life is made shorter rather than longer because you're not correcting the imbalance by restoring the natural substance that needs to be there in higher concentration.
We've been talking to Dr. Joel Brind. We've been talking about the need in your body for glycine and a product that he developed really to help prove this and to help individuals. It's called Sweetamin. This is not designed, by the way. This isn't a commercial. Dr. Brind is a friend. He's a scientist. He's actually, as good scientists have throughout history, he's been conducting these experiments on himself. He believes in this issue so much. He has done other research on other issues, and I have come to trust him and his desire to help human beings. That's what good scientists do. And as I said earlier, sadly, medical science has changed. It's changed its focus, and you need to be ready to engage in the battle of ideas that's raging around us right now. That's why our program on Life Matters focuses on life, on culture, and the battle of ideas. We've been very honored to have Dr. Brind, and if you want to find out more, go to Sweetamin, Sweetamin, SWEETAMINE.com. You can find out more. That's Sweetamin.com.
Learn more about everything in today's show online at lifematters.life, where you'll find all the resources you need to protect life. Life Matters is a production of the California Pro-Life Council, the state affiliate of National Right to Life.